Nominees and an executive nominee. They are Richard Federico, nominated to the Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit; Judge Joshua Kohler, nominated to the Court of Appeals for the 7th Circuit; Judge Bryan, nominated to the District of Minnesota; Judge Yumi Lee, nominated to the Northern District of California; and Deborah Robinson, nominated to be the Intellectual Property Enforcement Coordinator in the Executive Office of the President. My congratulations are extended to each nominee and their family. First, I'd like to note that Mr. Federico and Judge Kohler both currently serve in the U.S. Armed Forces as reservists following previous active duty service, and we thank them for that. Second, each of today's judicial nominees has received blue slips from both of their home state senators. This includes Mr. Federico, who has received a blue slip from Senator Moran, who is here today, and Senator Marshall of Kansas. It also includes Judge Kohler, who has received blue slips from Senator Young, who is here with us, and Senator Bryan of Indiana. I want to thank these senators from Kansas and Indiana for continuing to work with the White House in good faith to fill judicial vacancies in their state on a bipartisan basis. There's been a lot of criticism of this blue slip process, and it has been abused in the past. But these senators and the White House counsel's office have shown once again this process can work if people of goodwill meet together and do their best. We can result in outstanding nominees such as those before us today. I'm encouraged that several of my Republican colleagues in the White House have done this and swiftly identified and advanced highly qualified nominees. I look forward to seeing more of the same. We have several colleagues joining us today to introduce our nominees, and Senator Graham would have made an opening statement at this point, but we'll hold that until he arrives. And first, let's start with the introductions by Senator Moran of Kansas.
Chairman Durbin, thank you, and to Senator Graham, my respects and regard when he arrives, and thank you to all the committee members for their attention today. I've had the opportunity of being in front of this committee. This, I believe, is my third time in support of a judicial nomination related to Kansas. And I appreciate what the chairman had to say. I take my responsibilities as a senator, as do all senators, seriously. And I'd like at least part of my legacy in my service in the United States Senate to be that I participated in a process that provided a good judicial members of the judiciary for Kansas now and in the future. I take this responsibility seriously, and I want Kansas nominees to be of the highest quality, and I'm here today in support of one that is. It's my pleasure to introduce Captain Richard Federico for the seat on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit. The 10th Circuit sits in Denver. Kansas is one of its constituent states. I appreciate that Rich Federico made the right choice in making Kansas his home after moving to our state in order to attend law school at the University of Kansas. Although his military service has moved him around the country, Kansas has remained his home for him and his family. Rich has had an impressive 21 years of service, including 13 years on active duty in the Navy's Judge Advocate Corps. During his service, Rich has served as a prosecutor, a defense counsel, and as a judge. His extensive and diverse experience resulted in a unanimous, well-qualified rating by the American Bar Association, and in my view, a deserved position or serious consideration for that position for a seat on the 10th Circuit. We know that military service is family service, and that service members are made stronger by family members who support them. And so today I use this as an opportunity not only to thank him, Mr. Federico, Captain Federico, as a member of the Armed Services for his present and past service, but also to thank his family. His wife, Ann, is here. She's a native of McPherson, Kansas, and their children, Mia and Libby. You should meet their family, his family, and you too will reach the conclusion that Captain Federico deserves your confirmation. Aye. In his 8th year in the Navy Reserves, Captain Federico currently is serving as a litigator in the Federal Public Defender's Office for the District of Kansas. Public defense has been a critical component of the fabric of our judicial system. I'm sure, as the ranking member can speak, from his own experiences in the JAG Corps, it's important that defendants in our justice system are represented to hold the government to its highest standard in the defense of our civil liberties. It's also important the judiciary continues to recognize this component and having both been a prosecutor and a defense attorney, I believe Captain Federico will bring an important perspective to the 10th Circuit. I thank Captain Federico and his family for their willingness to continue to serve the United States of America, and I look forward to the hearing today as it proceeds. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Senator Moran. Senator Young.
Thank you, Chairman, Ranking Member Graham, and members of the committee. I come before you today to introduce a fellow Hoosier, Judge Joshua Kohler, as the President's nominee for the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 7th Circuit. Judge Kohler is joined behind me today by Rachel, his beautiful wife, and their 4 lovely children, and the row behind that, we find his father, Bob, and his mom, Brooke. So he has an amazing and very supportive family, and we thank them for all of their service in their respective capacities. You, I know, have seen his bio, but beyond his legal credentials, you're no doubt impressed, as I was, by his service in the U.S. Navy Reserves. The slogan for the Navy Reserves is "Ready now, anytime, anywhere." And in reviewing his judicial record and hearing from his colleagues, it's apparent that the slogan applies not only to Judge Kohler's military service, but to his courtroom service as well. I've received several letters of support for Judge Kohler, and among the adjectives used to describe him are thoughtful, decisive, straight shooter, diligent, civil, professional, and one of the best. This high praise comes from individuals he's worked for and with in the United States Attorney's Office, as well as those who have appeared before him in his current capacity as magistrate judge. I'm proud of Indiana's string of judicial appointments that have been confirmed by bipartisan majorities, and my hope is that this hearing will demonstrate that Judge Kohler is ready now, anytime, anywhere, and worthy of your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Young, and thank you for your service to our nation. We have a number of other nominees, and the first I'll recognize is Senator Klobuchar to introduce Judge Bryan.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Durbin. I'll defer first to my colleague who's a visitor to our committee, and then I'll go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Chair Durbin.
Tina Smith is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Chair Durbin and Ranking Member Graham, and to all the members of the committee, I want to thank you for the opportunity to introduce Judge Jeffrey Bryan, an outstanding nominee to be Federal District Court Judge for the District of Minnesota. And I particularly want to thank my colleague, Senator Amy Klobuchar, for her dedication and hard work on this committee, and for the work that I know that she'll be doing to support the nomination of Judge Bryan along with myself. Let me begin by recognizing those here today who are supporting Judge Bryan, including his wife, Liz Kramer, and his longtime friend and fellow law school graduate, I understand, Father Richard Avila. And I'd also like to acknowledge Judge Bryan's family and friends and mentors who couldn't be here today but are undoubtedly cheering him on from Minnesota and elsewhere. Thank you all for your support of this excellent judge. Judge Bryan's background and experience make him extraordinarily well qualified to serve as a federal district court judge. An experienced state court judge and former federal prosecutor, he is an exemplary public servant who is dedicated to the fair and equitable administration of justice. After earning his J.D. from the Yale Law School, Judge Bryan clerked for Judge Paul Magnuson of the District Court for the District of Minnesota, the same court to which he is now nominated. After a stint at the Minneapolis firm of Robbins Kaplan as a civil litigation associate, he joined the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota as an assistant U.S. attorney, where he prosecuted drug crimes and white-collar defendants. In 2013, he was appointed as a trial court judge in Minnesota. During his tenure on the bench, he was recognized for his leadership in recommending and implementing important reforms to our state's judicial justice system. Then, in 2019, Judge Bryan was appointed to serve on the Minnesota Court of Appeals, where he has decided over 500 cases. Judge Bryan was recommended by an independent judicial selection committee that Senator Klobuchar and I convened, comprised of distinguished lawyers, advocates, and judges from Minnesota. He has committed colleagues to the rule of law and fair administration of justice. He is a first-rate legal mind, and with his judicial experience and federal trial court experience, I know that Judge Bryan is ready to serve as an outstanding federal district court judge from his first day on the job. So I urge you to support his nomination. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Smith. Senator Klobuchar?
Well, thank you. It's great to be here with my colleague and with all of you, and back from our weeks at home. I just wanted to add some things to Tina's great review of Judge Bryan's record. He was born in an Army hospital. I'm doing this for Senator Tillis's sake. An Army hospital on Fort Bragg. As Tina noted, he grew up as a son of a captain with the 82nd Airborne, who instilled in Judge Bryan an appreciation for public service. His mom was an English teacher. His father's work with the Army brought their family to Fort Bliss near El Paso, and that's where Judge Bryan spent most of his upbringing. That's where he went to college. And after graduating summa cum laude from the University of Texas, he went back home to El Paso and worked as a substitute teacher before going to law school. As a law student at Yale, he served as a student supervisor in the Parents and Children Clinic and was president of the Law School Christian Fellowship. He also met the love of his life, a Minnesotan at law school, and ultimately he traded the Texas heat for Minnesota winters as he and Liz settled down in St. Paul, Minnesota. If he is confirmed, he will be the first Latino federal judge in Minnesota. He is active in the Minnesota Hispanic Bar Association. He served on the board of Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity, the Minnesota Urban Debate League, and the local Bar Association. For 20 years, even before he had children himself, he taught Sunday school at his church. After his clerkship for Judge Paul Magnuson, a judge appointed by President Reagan, and several years in private practice, Judge Bryan spent 6 years, as Tina noted, as an assistant U.S. attorney where he prosecuted violent gangs and large-scale drug trafficking organizations. He prosecuted over 350 criminals and directed what was at that time the largest cocaine and the largest meth investigations ever conducted in the District of Minnesota. He played a key role in dismantling a cocaine trafficking network that spanned from McAllen, Texas to St. Cloud, Minnesota. Additionally, he led an investigation that resulted in the recovery of more than 9,600 grams of meth, as well as convictions of more than 60 defendants. We have heard from former local, state, and federal law enforcement officials who praised him for his work ethic and dedication to administering justice. He was hired as a prosecutor by Erica McDonald, who went on to be appointed by President Trump to serve as U.S. Attorney for Minnesota. She also gave a rec, as well as many Democratic appointed prosecutors and judges. Judge Bryan left the U.S. Attorney's Office in 2013 and was noted by Senator Smith, was appointed to serve on the Ramsey County District Court in St. Paul, where he presided over 8,000 cases. In 2019, he was appointed to serve as a judge on the Minnesota Court of Appeals. He has sat on over 500 cases and an appellate judge and has authored nearly 200 opinions and has only been reversed in 2 cases, which is better than our record around here. Judge Bryan has earned endorsements, as I noted, of some of the most esteemed jurists in our state, including 4 senior U.S. District Court judges. For the same reasons, the ABA Standing Committee on the Federal Judiciary rated Judge Bryan as well qualified to serve, the highest rating that the committee awards. I know he will make an outstanding federal district court judge for the District of Minnesota. Every judge I have nominated since I've gotten here, with the president's help on both sides of the aisle, have received bipartisan support, and I want to keep my record. So this is a really, really good judge, and Senator Smith and I are proud of the work of our committee and hope that you will support him. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Klobuchar. Before recognizing Senator Feinstein, who will introduce one of the nominees, I recognize my colleague, ranking member of the committee, Lindsey Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome back, everybody. I'll try to be brief. As we move forward today on nominations, it's very heartening to see our Republican and Democratic colleagues working together on circuit nominations. That's a compliment to y'all. I'm trying to find a way to work with my Democratic colleagues on appointments. They won the election, and that comes with winning, and I think we've done a pretty good job. So hats off to both of you. Everybody has been asked or will be asked about military nominations. I have talked to Senator Tuberville many times. I understand his concerns about DOD abortion policy. I share those concerns. I was under the assumption that we would vote on that policy. I think he's entitled to vote to change it. I would gladly support him in his efforts to change that policy. Apparently, that's not going to be enough. Just got back from a trip around the world here, and one thing I know for sure, the world is not getting a safer place, it's getting a more dangerous place. To my colleagues, I think we need a vote on abortion policy by the Pentagon, but we also need to get these folks promoted. An individual promotion should be stopped, in my view, because of the behavior of the individual. All of us here have gripes with one another and with the administration. There is no end to this war once you start it. We have yet to do this, and I hope this will not be the norm. We put people on hold, we block nominations to try to get the attention of our colleagues on the other side. That makes perfect sense to me. But the one thing we all depend on is an effective military. We have over 300 nominations that have been stalled at a time when we need leadership in the military. So I'm hoping that we can find a way to have a vote on the underlying abortion policy. And if that's not enough, that we'll dedicate floor time, Mr. Chairman, to getting these nominees to move forward. One last thing. It's September the 6th. The chance of getting 12 appropriation bills through the Senate and the House to the President's desk is pretty remote. I compliment Senator Collins and Murray for passing 12 bills through the Appropriations Committee. We're going to take up a minibus next week. I'm all for a regular order, but I'm not for the government shutting down. So we're going to eventually need a CR. But we also will need a supplemental because of Hawaii and many other things. I just want to let the body know, from my point of view, I will not vote for an omnibus bill. I'm not ever going to do that again. So we need to be thinking about how this movie ends with a supplemental that will get bipartisan support to deal with the issues that our nation faces. So the idea of an omnibus in December is off the table for me. Thank you.
I might say in response that my colleague Senator Graham and I disagree on many issues, but we are friends. And we work together as well on many issues, and we'll continue to. And I think your statement about the situation with military promotions is one I hope your colleagues share on your side of the aisle. 9 months. It's been 9 months since one senator from Alabama has held up the promotions of hundreds of professional military who are seeking to move up because of their commitment to our country and their willingness to risk their lives for our country. It is a hardship not only on them, but a hardship on their families for one senator to hold up these nominations on the floor. There are many opportunities to raise many issues before us, but to hold hostage innocent men and women who have dedicated their lives to our country and risked their lives and been rewarded for their service in the past is just unfair, fundamentally unfair to these families. If you say you stand behind our military and love our military, prove it. Stop what's going on the floor of the United States Senate. This debate on the other issues can take place in many different venues, but not at the expense of these good women and men who've served our country so well. So I certainly hope we can move forward on those quickly. 9 months, they're waiting. Kids, I understand the kids of these families not sure where they're going to go to school this year. They start in one school and they may be headed to another. For goodness sakes, we're doing this to men and women who risk their lives for our country. Shame on us. I'm glad you said what you did, Senator. Now, we have several other nominees to be introduced, and I offered to my friends, colleagues who've come here and already testified if they have to leave because of their schedule, we certainly understand it. But next will be Senator Feinstein, who's going to introduce nominee Lee. Senator Feinstein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to join in the introductions of Kim Lee, who has been nominated to serve on the Northern District of California. Judge Lee currently serves as a state court judge on the California Superior Court in Alameda County, as many of you know. Has both the skills and the experience needed to serve on the federal bench. I think that's a fair conclusion from this Bay Area. Judge Lee is a graduate of Pomona College. She received her law degree from the Georgetown University Law Center. Early in her career, she gained important insight into the role of a federal judge when she served as a law clerk for 2 federal judges, Judge Warren Ferguson, of the Ninth Circuit, and Judge Jerome Turner of the Western District of Tennessee. She then entered private practice. So you see, she's had a multitude of experience, which I believe serves a judge well. In 2005, she joined the faculty at the University of California Law School in San Francisco, again broadening her views. She served as a professor in the clinical program where she taught law students about the practical application of the law to the real world as it exists. In 2018, she was appointed to serve as a state court judge on the California Superior Court for Alameda County. During her 5 years of judicial service, she has presided in over 70 trials and thousands of hearings in both civil and criminal cases. She is, in fact, well qualified. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Padilla?
Thank you, Chairman Durbin and Ranking Member Graham. I'll try not to be too repetitive, but it is also my honor to introduce President Biden's latest nominee to serve on the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California, Judge Lee. Judge Lee is joined today by her family, and I know that we're a long way from the Bay Area, but I want to thank her family and her friends for supporting her and allowing her to continue to serve. We also know there's a lot of family and friends watching from back home, and it just speaks volumes of her willingness to serve and their support of her in service to not just the judiciary, but to our country. Judge Lee is a proud daughter of 2 parents who survived the Korean War before immigrating to the United States. Judge Lee was born in Wisconsin and grew up in Tennessee, but her commitment to public service would eventually bring her to the Bay Area in California. As you've heard from Senator Feinstein, she earned her BA from Pomona College in 1994. She worked as a teacher in Oakland, California for 2 years with Teach for America before earning her JD from Georgetown University Law Center in 1999. After law school, she clerked for several federal judges. First, at home in the Western District of Tennessee, where she clerked for Judge Jerome Turner, and later she clerked for Judge Warren Ferguson on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Those early days also included a period working in private practice where she focused on complex litigation and white-collar defense, and where she first developed a pro bono practice. Later, in addition to serving as an independent legal consultant, she began teaching as a professor at UC Hastings College of Law. Her commitment to equal justice was reflected in the co-founding of the Hastings Institute for Criminal Justice. And in December 2018, Governor Brown appointed Judge Lee to serve on the Alameda County Superior Court, where she became the first Korean American ever appointed to serve on that bench. Over the last 5 years, she's presided over both civil and criminal matters, gaining immense and important experience and demonstrating a wealth of legal expertise. And throughout her 20 years of diverse experience practicing law, she helped to support and mentor women, people of color, and others typically underrepresented in the legal profession. Why? It's because Judge Lee serves our country every day, knowing that our justice system works best when it reflects the diversity of the country that it serves. So colleagues in private practice, in the classroom, and in the courtroom, she's demonstrated the intellect, the temperament, and the independent thinking needed to not just serve on the federal bench, but to serve with distinction. And I encourage my colleagues to join me in proudly supporting her nomination today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Senator Padilla. I'm pleased to introduce Ms. Deborah Robinson, nominated to be the Intellectual Property Enforcement Coordinator. Born in Philadelphia, she attended Howard University and earned her JD from the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. She began her career in private practice, but she also, after beginning her career in private practice, she served in the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office for 7 years. In 2005, relevant to this nomination, she joined the Recording Industry Association of America, providing guidance and legal support for criminal investigations and prosecutions of illegal distributions of sound recordings. Spent 10 years with Paramount Global as Vice President and Senior Counsel in Content Protection, and over the course of her career handled content protection and IP matters at federal and state levels. She's created and implemented global anti-piracy strategies, managed civil litigation, consulted on a number of legal matters pertaining to entertainment and content protection. I look forward to hearing more about her breadth of experience when her panel is called a little later. Congratulations to Ms. Robinson and her family. Now, there are 3 levels of Article III courts. Of course, we are all familiar with the district court level, then the circuit court level, and of course, the Supreme Court. In deference to that ranking, we will start with the 2 circuit court nominees, and I ask them to come forward. Mr. Federico and Judge Kohler, if you each approach the table and stand to be sworn. If you'll raise your right hand. Do you affirm the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that both nominees have answered in the affirmative, and that makes my job easier. And we'll start with Mr. Federico. Please proceed with your opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Durman, Ranking Member Graham, and members of the committee. It is truly my honor to be sitting before you today. I first want to thank President Biden for the special trust and confidence he has placed within me with this nomination. I want to thank Senator Jerry Moran and Senator Roger Marshall from the great state of Kansas for the graciousness they have shown me throughout this process, and in particular Senator Moran for his introductory remarks this morning. I want to acknowledge the nearly 3 decades of service of the Honorable Mary Beck Briscoe of Kansas to the Circuit Court. Her service on that court has my respect and admiration. I want to introduce and thank my parents who I know are watching, Judy Federico in Florida, my stepmother Greta Federico, and Father Rick Federico in Arizona. To my many friends, family, shipmates, and colleagues, I say thank you for your support. I would like to introduce some who are with me here this morning. My sister, Jenny Stout, who flew in this morning from Indianapolis. My law school classmate and longtime friend, Christy Miser, with her husband, Navy Captain Bryan Miser, who is my longtime Navy shipmate and best Navy friend. My law school classmate, fellow Kansan and good friend, Jenny Guttery, and my former colleague and friend, Lieutenant Colonel Amy Fitzgibbons of the Army JAG Corps. To the Navy, I would not be sitting here today before you but for the training, experience, and opportunities that I was afforded while serving as a naval officer and the persons I was able to serve with in uniform. For almost my entire adult life, I've had the honor and pleasure to serve as a Navy judge advocate, and I'm especially proud to be sitting here today next to a fellow naval officer and fellow nominee in Judge Kohler. The Navy gave me the confidence as a leader and lawyer, which has carried me in my legal career. And having served in joint commands, I know my remarks are equally applicable to all branches of our armed services. But in my opinion, the Judge Advocate General Corps is the crown jewel of our legal system. You will never find another group of legal professionals more dedicated to service and to upholding the rule of law than the JAG Corps, and I'm grateful to be a part of it. I'm also fortunate to serve as a federal public defender, first in the District of Oregon, and now with the District of Kansas. Public defenders are dedicated public servants and tireless advocates. To my many brilliant friends and colleagues in the public defender offices who have my utmost respect and gratitude, I say thank you. I would like to introduce our daughters, Mia and Libby, I'm excited were able to join us here in Washington this morning. They, in turn, are equally excited to be missing a few days of school to be here in Washington. I am here today for what is essentially a very important job interview. But girls, the most important job I will ever have is as your dad. I'm very proud of you and thank you for your love and support. And lastly, and mostly, I want to introduce and thank my wife, Ann. Ann is my life partner, my law school classmate, my ethics counselor. She is the bedrock foundation of our family. Ann, thank you for all that you do, for your love and support for our family. Thank you again to the committee for allowing me to be here and inviting me here this morning. I welcome and invite your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Federico. Judge Kohler?
Good morning. Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Graham, and members of the committee. Thank you for the privilege of appearing before you today. And thank you to the President for the humbling nomination to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. I'm very grateful for the support of my home state senators, Senator Young and Senator Braun. I was moved by Senator Young's words right now, as well as his gracious hospitality here in the Capitol. I'd like to introduce some people sitting behind me today who have inspired my public service and made it possible. My parents, Bob and Brooke Kohler, instilled in me the importance of education and community service, and their love and support, in a very real way, laid the foundation for the life that I lead today. And today I am very fortunate to have my wife, Rachel, as my best friend and partner in raising our four wonderfully chaotic boys, 11, 9, 6, and 3, who are going to be quiet for the remainder of this hearing. I also have sister, aunts, uncles, friends, and family who are watching, and I can't thank them all, but I would not be here without them. I was incredibly lucky and have been incredibly lucky throughout my career to have amazing mentors and colleagues that I've learned from. First, retired Judge Wayne Anderson taught me invaluable lessons when I was clerking for him. And I continued to learn those lessons from partners and colleagues that I worked with and for in private practice. Over 15 years ago, I was fortunate enough to start working in the Northern District of Indiana, where I continued to learn from opposing counsel, colleagues, and the court. And I was incredibly honored when the judges of the Northern District of Indiana selected me as a magistrate judge. The hard-working judicial officers and staff of the Northern District of Indiana are wonderful colleagues who continue to teach me lessons every day. I am incredibly proud to continue my service in the Navy Reserve, and I know that my family continues that service with me. Their love and support is what allows me to serve in multiple capacities, and I'm very proud of the lessons the boys are learning and the people they're becoming. I'd like to thank, finally, the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines that I've served with. They too have taught me wonderful lessons and continue to inspire my service. Senators, I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Judge Kohler. We each have 5-minute rounds to ask the nominees questions, and I'll start with Mr. Federico. I think we have considered approximately 157 nominees for Article III judgeships before this committee in the time that I've been the chairman. And I would say that it's pretty predictable how each of us react after all those experiences and all the different nominees. There's a feeling among some that anyone who is a public defender is soft on crime and won't take it seriously. And they'll go back in cases that they defended and say, that criminal defendant was a bad guy, and you stood up for him and fought for his rights in court and did your duty as a defense counsel. And they'll think that that really tells the story of what kind of judge you may be. Now, you have a confounding background when it comes to that because you've served as both a prosecutor and as a defense counsel in your career, and certainly during the time you were serving in the Navy and Navy Reserve, I'm sure you had opportunities to deal with both sides and both tables in the room. What can you tell us about your background that would assure people that you will be fair-minded and not lean one way or the other when it comes to criminal cases?
Mr. Chairman, as you noted, I have served as a Navy prosecutor. My first full active duty tours were as a Navy prosecutor, first here in Norfolk, Virginia, and then overseas in Europe and Southwest Asia. So I had the experience as a prosecutor before I received orders to then go on the defense side at the military commissions, and then I later was an officer in charge of defense offices. So as an active duty judge advocate, I certainly experienced both sides of the aisle. I think that makes me potentially understand the equities that the parties bring within the courtroom. Of course, later in my career, I've become a military judge, and so transferring from an advocate onto the bench to neutrally decide the issues that are before me in cases, I know that I was able to lean on my experience as a prosecutor and as a defense counsel and as an appellate defense counsel in my reserve capacity. So certainly in my military career, I have done both sides of the aisle. I know that can only make me a better circuit judge. As a federal public defender, of course, I get court appointed to represent persons charged in federal court with crimes. But again, my job, and I believe very strongly in the Sixth Amendment and the right to counsel, and what a great country and system we have, that not only do we afford counsel to persons that are charged, but we demand that that counsel represent them zealously within the bounds of the law. So I take that oath I took as a lawyer, similar to the oath I took as a naval officer, very seriously. And I understand that crime impacts all of our communities. I've worked with victims directly, with victim outreach, and so I understand that side of it as well. It is my hope and belief that all of those experiences will make me a better circuit judge should I be confirmed.
Thank you. Judge Kohler, I have to confess a conflict of interest. Wayne Anderson has been my personal friend for decades, and we went out to dinner together just a few months ago. I know you clerk for him, and he's now in private life, but he's a member of the other party in my state that I've respected and counted as a friend for a long period of time, and I'm sure you feel the same about him. How about this world of appellate practice? Tell me about your preparation for that.
Thank you, Senator. I started at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Northern District of Indiana as the appellate point of contact, and I was fortunate enough early in my career as a federal prosecutor to focus on appellate work, and I drafted or argued over 20 cases in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. And that was an experience that laid the groundwork in a very real way for my career on the bench now and my time as a federal prosecutor. It allowed me to see how a record develops and how that translates into appellate practice, and gave me deep familiarity with the entire spectrum of a case from the beginning to end. It helped me in avoiding issues as a prosecutor when I later went on to prosecute complex cases, and I think it's prepared me well for the position of circuit judge.
Thanks, Judge Kohler. Senator Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I try to be open-minded and broad-minded about nominations. I'm even willing to consider two people from the Navy, which is a stretch for me. But anyway, I can see why you have support of your senators. You seem to be incredibly bothly talented and dedicated to the law and to the country, so congratulations to you and your family. My view of this process is to try to find out if you're qualified and not to replace my judgment for yours on political issues, and just to make sure that you're well-rounded in the law, and I think you both are. And I was a military defense attorney. I didn't get to pick my clients. They came over to the office, and once they were there, I did my best. Mr. Federico, I think you represented some 9/11 defendants, is that right?
Yes, Senator, one 9/11 defendant.
Tell me about that.
Senator, I reported the Office of Military Commissions Defense in 2008 in the spring. As you may recall, and I know you worked hard on those policy issues, that was after the passage of the Military Commissions Act of 2006. That was when the 9/11 case was first charged. I learned on my first day in the office from my military leadership that I would be detailed to that case. I didn't know going in that was one of the cases I would work on. Of course, I then found it to be both...
Was it fair to say you did your best and gave it your all?
Yes, Senator, I did.
Okay. Mr. Kohler, your time in the Navy. How's that prepared you for what awaits you, you think?
Senator Graham, it's prepared me in a number of ways. First, the ongoing service of the people that I've had the honor of serving with really does inspire me, even as I do my civilian job. Second, when I'm in uniform, I have a chain of command, and it's important that I follow that chain of command. And I feel the same way when I'm in chambers. My job is to follow the chain of command, follow binding precedent, both as a naval intelligence officer and as a judge. I try to make sure that I'm rigorously analyzing anything that comes before me and taking into account all relevant facts. And in the end, I do my job within that chain of command, and I'm inspired to do so by those with whom I'm served.
So let me ask you about problems our nation faces. Do you believe that ISIS and other radical Islamic groups represent a threat to the United States?
Senator, I've prosecuted cases involving ISIS and other terrorist organizations where people were inspired by rhetoric that certainly can cause a danger to the United States and violates multiple federal laws that this body has passed.
You agree to that, Mr. Federico?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay, so even though we're in an undeclared war, the enemy is out there. Are you familiar with the term enemy combatant? Both of you?
Yes, Senator, I am.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Could you very briefly explain what an enemy combatant is?
Senator, under the Geneva Conventions in particular, you designate persons as combatants and non-combatants. An enemy combatant is a person who has the status as a combatant, but of course is an opposing force.
We have people held at Guantanamo Bay now under the designation as enemy combatants. Are you both familiar with that?
Yes, Senator.
Yes, Senator.
Okay. Our Supreme Court has reviewed those cases.
Yes, Senator.
You agree? Okay. Under the law of war, can an enemy combatant be held off the battlefield as long as they're a threat to our nation?
Senator, I'll say under the law of armed conflict, it has always been that you can detain enemy combatants through the duration of hostilities.
Mr. Kohler?
It's accurate, Senator.
Okay. Do you know when this war is going to be over?
I hope as soon as possible, Senator.
But do you agree with me it's ongoing?
Senator, we've had a declared, or certain wars in certain theaters are over. I agree with you, however, that there are still enemies out there and that there is still active armed conflict in certain areas.
You agree with that, Mr. Kohler?
I agree with that, Senator. The duration of the hostilities is determined by the President and in certain instances this body as well.
Thank you very much.
Senator Klobuchar?
Thank you very much. I'm just going to ask you each two sets of questions because I know my colleagues have questions to ask. Mr. Federico, for much of your career, you were tasked, as Senator Graham pointed out, with being a zealous advocate for the interests of your clients as an attorney in the Navy as well as a public defender. You have represented clients who've been accused of serious crimes. You've also prosecuted cases and served as a military judge presiding in over nearly a dozen cases. Can you say more about how your view about the role of a judge and how it differs from that of an advocate? And do you have any reservations about setting your personal views to the side when evaluating the facts or the laws as a judge? And talk a little bit about that difference of your past work, because you've been on, you get all the sides, and how you've been able to do that as a magistrate judge.
Thank you, Senator. I'll answer the second question first. I have absolutely no reservations or hesitations about setting aside my role as an advocate if and when I'm confirmed as a circuit judge. In fact, I've, as you noted, had that experience as a military judge. And so an advocate's job is to represent the interests of a client as zealously as you can within the bounds of the law. I have, of course, departed from that role as an advocate as a military judge, put on the robe, and assumed the bench. And just as if confirmed, I would have no hesitation to become a neutral arbiter of the issues and disputes before me. I've done that as a military judge, and I could do it again as a circuit judge.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Kohler, congratulations, Judge. I think we in Minnesota, we've had two magistrate judges. since my tenure on this committee that have become federal judges. I think it's great experience. For one thing, you know the judges, and that helps. And you were appointed by the sitting district court judges and have presided over things like civil motions, criminal proceedings, settlement conferences. How has your experience as a magistrate judge informed your views of what you'll be like as a federal judge?
Senator, it's been an incredible honor to serve as a magistrate judge. As you indicated, it's an honor to serve the court and the judges of the court. And more specifically, I think it's prepared me very well for the role of circuit judge. I have cases that I have on consent where I've tried jury trials or decided other dispositive issues. I understand the civil docket and everything that goes into it in the discovery process. Obviously, I have vast experience in the criminal area as well, and that has allowed me to see cases from beginning to end and understand what the record is when you're then reading it kind of cold, if you will, from an appellate standpoint after having done appellate work as an assistant United States attorney. So it's prepared me well to understand the range of issues that come before federal courts and how that record is made and practical things to consider on appeal.
Thank you very much.
Senator Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge Kohler, am I saying your name right?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. Will you allow your personal beliefs to affect your judgment on the bench?
No, Senator.
Okay. Do you have personal beliefs?
Senator, I have personal beliefs like anyone, and I certainly understand the issues that the country is facing. I try very hard because of the fact that both as a reservist and as a sitting federal judge, I have to act within a chain of command, and specifically as a judge, only decide issues after I've been presented arguments by the party to reserve.
You were in the Navy?
Yes, Senator.
Do you think the Navy is systemically racist?
Senator, I've served with people in the Navy from all different backgrounds.
Yes, sir, but as an institution, do you think the Navy is systemically racist?
I think our armed forces were one of the first institutions in this country that were desegregated and allowed for people from all backgrounds to serve their country and better their lives. I don't necessarily understand what that term means
today,
to everyone, but I don't.
I think it's a pretty straightforward.
I don't think today the
Navy
I'm serving in is systemically racist.
Okay. That's all I wanted to know. Judge, our second judge, will you allow your personal beliefs to interfere with your judgment on the bench?
No, Senator.
And do you have personal beliefs?
Yes, Senator.
I'm glad to hear that both of you have personal beliefs. You've thought about the world. Judge, do you think minorities need special help to achieve?
Senator, I think as a country, we have come a long way. There are certain issues that the Supreme Court just decided last term on a case of affirmative action that dealt with this issue.
Yes, sir, I'm familiar with the case. Do you believe that minorities in America need special help to succeed?
Senator, I think all people should deserve equal opportunity to succeed.
Okay. Do you believe minorities need special help to succeed?
Senator, again, I think based upon a person's background and their community they come from and what hardships they face, I hope that all persons in this country who work hard have an opportunity to succeed.
Let me try it again. Do you believe that minorities in America today need special help to achieve, to succeed?
Yeah, again, Senator, from all persons, no matter what community they come from.
Yes, sir, but do you understand the question? Am I not being clear?
No, I understand, yes, sir.
Okay, would you answer it for me, please, sir?
Well, Senator, I'm stating again.
Say yes or no. It's pretty simple.
Well, I believe that is a complex question in many ways that it's difficult to answer yes or no. Again, I believe all persons.
I don't understand why. You either believe that minorities need special help to succeed or you don't. Is there a reason you won't answer my question?
Well, Senator, again, my answer is persons from all communities. I would also note, of course, there are certain issues when you say minorities.
You're not going to answer it, are you?
Well, like race, that has been the
Okay,
Supreme
let's move
Court.
on. I think by not answering it, you have answered it, but can you tell me what you think about the Navy, whether it's systemically racist?
Senator, the Navy I know is not, and in fact, its primary focus is to be the most lethal maritime fighting force in the world.
Okay, thank you for a straightforward answer. Do you, Judge, we'll move back to our second judge. Judge, do you think that a person's sex is a biological reality, or do you think it's a social construct?
Senator, there certainly is a biological reality of sex assigned at birth, but
Right.
there are, as you're well aware, issues that are before the courts, both in district courts and appellate courts, where individuals are raising issues about how to define
Okay.
that.
Let me
later in
ask
life.
you, I can tell you're reluctant to answer it. And these are tough questions, but I want to know what you think. I'm entitled to know what you think, I think, before you vote. Do you think, Judge, minorities in America today need special help to succeed?
Senator, I
Do you
think
think
that
that's a complicated question?
Senator, I think it's a question that the Supreme Court, as you just
Yeah, but I'm just
indicated,
asking you what you believe.
So with the Supreme Court, and that's
Yes, sir, but what do
it's a-
you believe? I know what the Supreme Court has said. What
I
do you believe?
I believe that if I am presented with an argument that there is an affirmative action program.
What
or
about
any
you
type of-
personally?
or
And
any
you-
type.
What about you
program.
personally, not on the bench? We stipulated that you're not going to allow your personal judgment to affect your decisions on the bench, and I believe you. Do you think minorities need special help to succeed in America today? That's a pretty basic question.
I think that question, Senator, is one that the courts will struggle with after.
I'm way over. I just can't believe neither one of you gentlemen will answer my question. I just can't. That's about as fundamental as you get in terms of America today, and I really am disappointed. I thought you would hit it head on. You're going to have tough questions on the bench now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to be too repetitive of a lot of the important questions and issues that have been raised already, so I'll focus on just one. Anybody who's observed my questions of similar nominees over the last few years know that I care a lot about diversity. I think most people appreciate that the diversity of our country is a strength for us. We talk a lot about diversity, not just in the diversity of the nominees that have come from the president across government, but also in all levels of the judiciary. But beyond the diversity of the people who sit on the bench, I think diversity throughout the courtroom is helpful for the functioning of a courtroom and people's confidence in the judiciary. So my question to each of you is this: if you're fortunate enough to be confirmed, because you're always trained to preface every answer with that, what would you, well, first of all, do you agree with my value statement about diversity? And if you do, what would you do to ensure diversity in the courtroom, not just among support staff or bailiffs, but specifically I want to hear about law clerks, because the other flip side of this question is, tell me if your experience or observation is different, but a quality clerkship experience can be very pivotal for a young lawyer that maybe seeks to serve on the bench one day or be a leader in private practice or elsewhere in the legal career. So do you agree with my value statement on diversity? And what would you do to foster diversity in your courtroom? Mr. Federico.
Senator, first of all, I absolutely agree with you. And secondly, you mentioned clerkships in particular. I believe, and very strongly, that the diversity of viewpoint is extremely important. I would want clerks who come from a variety of communities, diversity in the broadest sense, who are not afraid to challenge my view of the law so that we can, as a group, produce a better quality in the opinions that come out of my chambers if I'm confirmed. I also view judges as leaders within the legal community, and it would be my responsibility, if confirmed, to hire and train the next generation of leaders. So I want clerks who will come in with an open mind, with a diverse viewpoint and opinions, who are not afraid to express those opinions, even when they differ from mine, and who want to be leaders within their legal communities.
Thank you. Judge Kohler.
Senator, I agree with those comments. I find that organizations that are able to have individuals from all backgrounds are better able to execute their mission, frankly, whether that's in the military or whether that is in AA chambers. I certainly will strive to make sure that when I'm hiring clerks, I'm first conducting the outreach that's necessary to make sure that everyone's aware of the value of the clerkship experience, and that the clerkship experience is available to them. As Senator Durbin mentioned at the outset, I was very fortunate to have a clerkship with Judge Anderson that taught me an amazing amount and introduced me to many people in the legal community. And that's the type of thing that I would hope for anyone who comes through my chambers.
Thank you both. Mr. Chair, in closing, let me just state for the committee, let's not obfuscate equal treatment and equal opportunity with special treatment, as some would suggest. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. Senator Hawley. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see Senator Blackburn walk in. Senator Blackburn, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here, and congratulations on your nominations, and you guys are doing great. All the kids in here today are doing a great job, so good parenting. Mr. Kohler, I want to come to you on the Gibson case. And this is, do you remember that case?
Yes, sir.
The defendant, okay, Mr. Gibson, he was charged with 3 counts of bank fraud and 1 of aggravated identity theft. And I think we would agree these are pretty serious offenses. And both the government and the probation office recommended that Mr. Gibson be detained pending trial. But you decided to ignore that and to release him. And even when you did this, you noted his long arrest record and the numerous pending charges that were there and his multiple failures to appear in court. So you noted every bit of that. And then your word defining it was to say it was troubling that he had had these attempts to flee. And despite every bit of that, your recognition of it, your admission of it, your mentioning it, you decided that he should be released pending trial. And I would just like to know why you made that decision. And the reason is because in Tennessee, as I talked to Tennesseans, what bothers them is the rise in crime, the fact that prosecutors will not prosecute, and that judges will not sentence people. So as I reviewed your record, that one stood out to me. So I would like to know why you decided to release him pending trial.
Senator, public safety is incredibly important. It's something that I worked for within the confines of the legal
Okay,
system.
well then let me stop you right there. Because you also made the statement that he is, and I'm quoting you, likely a danger to the community. He may attempt to flee. So public safety was not the priority
Senator,
Okay.
I work in a hierarchical system, and in that case, I specifically noted that I did not have briefs in front of me, and I subsequently have indicated to both the prosecution and defense that if anyone were to brief that issue, I would consider it. And let me explain what that issue was. The Bail Reform Act and binding precedent tells me when I can release a defendant on conditions or when that defendant should be detained pending trial. I'm bound by the Bail Reform Act that was passed by this body. The Bail Reform Act itself is written in a way that I had to make a decision without briefs and without a good degree of case law in a quick circumstance where the government was focusing on one prong. Under the Bail Reform Act, there's two things that are usually argued, whether they're in
Okay, so you're
conditions or
saying it was a
combinations of-
process decision.
It was a decision that I felt I was bound by the plain meaning of the Bail Reform Act. And I made clear in my decision in writing that I had to
Okay.
make that finding on that
All right.
particular
well,
record. And
let
I
me
made clear-
let me move on. I do have a question for Mr. Federico, and this concerns the Gann case. You recall that one?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. Now, Mr. Gann had a habit of collecting child pornography, and he did this for years and years and years. And he sought out other offenders online to discuss torturing and sexually exploiting children. He ended up pleading guilty to distributing child pornography, and he could have received a sentence as high as 20 years. And that is under the guidelines, but you advocated for a sentence far below those guidelines and just for 9 years. Is that correct?
I don't remember the particulars of our sentencing recommendation, Senator, but I know I asked for a lower sentence than the government did.
And why would you do that?
Senator, I recall there were some objections to those guidelines that were sustained by the court. I don't recall how his final sentence was reflected in regards to the guideline range. I do know he was sentenced to over 10 years in federal prison.
Would you like to go back and look at that case so that you refresh your memory and then submit a fuller answer for the record?
Senator, I'm happy to do so.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hawley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Federico, let's keep talking about the Gann case that Senator Blackburn was just asking you about. This is a case where the sentencing guidelines recommended up to 240 months in prison. The guidelines range was 210 to 240. Do you remember what range you or what number you asked for from the court as his attorney?
I'm sorry, Senator, I don't recall the exact sentence.
It's 105, so less than half of the lowest end of the guidelines range. Now, the government in this case said that it was being very lenient. I've just read their sentencing memorandum and yours. I have them all right here. The government said it was being very lenient. Do you remember what they recommended to the court?
I'm sorry, Senator, I do not.
189 months. 189. You pushed for 105. Why is that?
Well, Senator, I'll note first, I've prosecuted those cases in equal number to the number I've defended. And so I have worked with victims, and I understand.
So what would you say to the victims in this case who, let's just review, Mr. Gann, I'm not going to read the specifics, it's too revolting. But let me just, this is from the pre-sentence report. This particular defendant, this is sanitized, but it's still unpleasant. The defendant used multiple mediums to access, obtain, and distribute depictions of child rape, bondage, and sexual exploitation. He used dating websites to meet people offering children for sex. He used email to send depictions of child sexual exploitation to his cohorts. Why 100 months? I mean, listen, you could have recommended any number of, I get that you want to defend your client, sure, but you could have chosen 175. You could have agreed with the government, 189, which they characterize already below guideline sentence and quite lenient. You advocated for 100. I mean, do you think that that's a sentence that does justice to his victims? You say you prosecuted these cases.
Yeah, well, Senator, yes, you noted the difference between when I'm court-appointed to represent them and zealously their interests compared to when I prosecute them. But ultimately, the decision as to the appropriate sentence in that case, like all others, lied with the district judge, Judge Brooms.
Right, but you made a choice to recommend and to advocate for a particular sentence, right? I mean, I'm looking at your memorandum right here. You did author it, I think, right?
Well, Senator, also when formulating a sentencing recommendation, the client's objectives also weigh heavily upon what we would ask the court to do when it determines.
Well, I'm sure the client would like to have 0 time in prison. So if you were going to just regurgitate what your client wanted, I'm sure he didn't want to be in prison at all. So some of the arguments that you made, you said that he had a work history that demonstrated that he was employable. Why should that result in a sentence of 100 months below the lowest guideline recommendation? I mean, how does that help his victims? I'm trying to understand here why you advocated this sentence for this individual.
Well, Senator, the sentencing statute 3553A tells the district court that it must take into account his history and characteristics. And so it is my job as his court-appointed advocate to present to the court information for it to take into consideration, things like employment. So
you're totally comfortable with this. You don't have any regrets about this at all?
Well, Senator, also as a defense lawyer, of course, when I am court-appointed to represent someone, it's not a personal endorsement upon their conduct. It is my job under our Sixth Amendment.
But nor are you an automaton, Mr. Federico. You're an officer of the court. You're a very capable attorney. You have to make moral judgments as a defense attorney. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, of course.
Yes, you have ethical obligations as a defense attorney. Wouldn't you agree?
I certainly do.
You have ethical obligations to the court as a defense attorney. Wouldn't you agree?
I do.
Okay. So your brain is fully engaged. You have a moral responsibility to society. Listen, I mean, you can recommend, as his attorney, you do whatever you want, right? But you're asking here for a lifetime appointment. So I think it's entirely appropriate we ask you about your judgment in these kinds of cases. This is a case with a defendant who committed very serious crimes against children and frankly contributed to a social problem so significant. This committee has recently passed major legislation, I hope will soon pass into law, that would overhaul our system with regard to this crime, and rightly so. So I want to know from you, do you think that the sentence that you recommended does justice to his victims?
Senator, I could not agree more about the problem.
That's really kind of a yes or no question, I think.
Well, Senator, again, on that case, I recommended the sentence weighing.
I know you did. Did it do justice to his victims?
Ultimately, it's the court that determined his.
But you had to make a decision, Mr. Federico. You had to make a decision as his attorney and an officer of the court whether this was appropriate or not. I'm asking about your judgment here. So are you comfortable with it now in retrospect? Are you comfortable with that? Do you think that sentence, 100 months, over 100 months less than what the lowest end of the guidelines was, 89 months less than what the government characterized as a very lenient sentence. The court ultimately gave him 165 months, years more than you wanted. Do you think that did justice to his victims?
Senator, again, it wasn't my decision as to his ultimate sentence. It was my decision.
I don't understand why you won't answer this question. I mean, isn't the answer yes if you're comfortable with it as his attorney? You can't blink your own responsibility in making the recommendation, right?
Well, Senator, I just don't recall, in particular in that case.
What's to recall? We've talked about all the salient details. I just read you your memorandum.
Well, I don't recall exactly how I landed on the specific sentencing recommendation that we made to the court.
Yeah. That sounds to me like it was a bad idea. It was way low, way low, and now you can't defend it. And frankly, neither can I. And for that reason, among others, I'm going to oppose your nomination. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Federico, did you say that you prosecuted cases of this nature as well?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have.
How did you happen to end up as a defense counsel in this case?
I was court appointed by the district court.
Thank you. Senator Welch?
Thank you very much. I came in at the end, but I used to be a public defender. And like you, I didn't choose who I represented. And oftentimes it was a very uncomfortable situation because who of us doesn't have enormous sympathy for victims? So that's a hard role, and I just want to express to you my gratitude that you took on the responsibility to maintain the integrity of our judicial system by making certain that everyone who's accused of a crime has access to competent, aggressive legal representation. And there were many times when people were very angry at me because they oftentimes mistook the role that I think a defense counsel plays, particularly public defender, where you have no role no benefit. You just do the job of representing the person the court has assigned you to represent. So I want to express to you my gratitude. By the way, Mr. Chairman, I'm extremely concerned about the proposed cuts to the federal defender budget. We cannot have a judicial system that doesn't have very competent public defenders to represent people and uphold the integrity of the judicial system. So my hope is that colleagues on the committee will be very supportive of making certain that the federal defender budget is absolutely solid to make certain that the integrity of the judicial process with vigorous prosecution and vigorous defense is upheld. But Mr. Federico, you've been asked by Senator Hawley about recommendations. I'm just going to give you an opportunity, you've probably already done it, about why you made, frankly, not the best career choice if the goal is to be a federal judge. This is not the chosen path, the proven path. Very proud of Justice Ketanji Brown. But how is it you made that decision? And tell us a little bit about that.
Senator, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about public defenders. And I also want to say how much I appreciate your remarks about the public defender budget. I know that's been an issue within our organization, and I know there are a lot of people who will thank you for that position. Senator, as you noted and yourself have the experience, being a public defender is a challenging but yet rewarding job as a lawyer. I mean, what an amazing country that we live in, that no matter who you are and what you're charged with, even those who we charge as our greatest enemies, not only we give that person a lawyer, but we give that lawyer the professional charge that you will do your best within the bounds of the law to represent them. That is a value that is enshrined within our Constitution that I believe we should all cherish, we should all respect, because it makes all of us more free. And it's been an honor to serve in that capacity.
And just to answer the question often asked to me, how do you think when you change your role from being a public defender to being a judge, you can be fair and impartial, because the responsibility of the judge is obviously completely different than the responsibility of either the prosecutor or the defense attorney, public defender?
Yes, Senator, I completely agree. The role of an advocate is different than that of a judge. I've been a prosecutor, I've been an appellate defense lawyer, a defender, and also, of course, a military judge. So I've had that experience already. I understand the differences between representing a client's interest in compared with being a neutral decider of issues that are brought before you on the court. And as a circuit judge, reviewing records of cases on appeal in a neutral, unbiased way, doing my very level best to decide the case based upon the record, facts, and the written law, and I pledge to do my best in that regard.
Okay, well, I want to thank you very much, Mr. Federico. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Senator Lee?
Thanks so much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to you for being here and being willing to serve. Mr. Federico, let's start with you. During the Trump administration, during the early weeks of the Trump administration, there was an announcement made about some changing procedures for handling expedited removal proceedings. You made a rather lengthy blog post on the Federal Public Defender blog. I was a little surprised to see that, because as a federal public defender, this is pretty clearly outside of your domain of where you operate as a federal public defender. In fact, in the post itself, you acknowledged the distinction between criminal proceedings, including criminal proceedings, for example, for illegal reentry, which is a federal offense, and removal proceedings, which are civil proceedings, not criminal proceedings. In what you're giving, in this post, you're giving advice, as far as I can tell, to individuals who may become subject to expedited removal proceedings. And the post lists these practical tips for people who find themselves in that circumstance, telling them what to do, what to say, what not to say, what to do in advance, how to arrange things with their documentation, arrangements for their children, and so forth. And then you attach a separate document that gives additional advice, a document put out by the ACLU. Now, it is understandable why the ACLU might put out a document like that. But I was surprised to see you put this out on the website, on the blog attached to the official website of the Federal Public Defender's Office. Just tell me why did you decide to write and publish this, and how is this consistent with your role as a federal public defender?
Senator, as I recall, I was asked to write that blog post by my office leadership, I think because we were getting a lot of calls about immigration matters. If I recall that blog post, also there is another lawyer who is an immigration lawyer whose name is on it as well. And I think we were careful to say, even though we do, as you noted, handle a lot of immigration matters in the criminal context, we were simply not taking any position on the policy changes, or if there were changes, simply stating what legal rights persons may have, which is sometimes what lawyers do.
Now, you are listed as the author of it. There's, in small text, very faint, some mention of a Melody Brannon. Is this another lawyer?
Yes, sir. Melody Brannon is the federal public defender for the District of Kansas.
Okay, and does she have a role in removal proceedings?
No, sir.
Okay, so it's also interesting that at the bottom of the post, you note, quote, that the document is not, quote, not meant to be and should not be relied upon as legal advice regarding immigration matters, close quote. So as best I can tell, this is more of just sort of a political statement. Does the Public Defender's Office in Kansas often make political statements or comment on political issues that are outside of its jurisdiction?
Senator, I'll speak for myself only, and I certainly don't or don't intend to.
And as someone who's employed by the federal government and an officer of the court, is it appropriate to issue documents that could be interpreted as facilitating the breaking of the law?
Well, Senator, certainly breaking of the law as a lawyer, I can never counsel clients to do that.
Okay, and how is this differentiated from that? So you're not, so that one of the things that I found interesting, when I discovered this, I went and found the blog. So I wanted to see what the website looks like as a whole and what the blog looks like as a whole. I couldn't tell right at first whether this was something operated independently by lawyers freelancing who happen to be employed there. It's not. This is attached to the official document. So this was published at government expense, operated on a government server. The rest of what I saw on there, obviously there's a lot of material there, but from my scanning through it, through material posted over years, the rest of it made perfect sense. As one who has long practiced in front of the 10th Circuit, it made sense to me. Here are the sitting dates for the 10th Circuit. Here are the hot issues affecting criminal matters before the 10th Circuit. Here are some issues related to motions to suppress based on this or that kind of evidence gathered in response to a search warrant, or things like that. This one was an aberration. It goes completely outside of your work on behalf of any clients and can be interpreted as advice to ameliorate the effects or perhaps even to facilitate the breaking of the law. How can we be certain that if we confirm you as a judge, you will be an even-handed arbiter of the law and not someone counseling or encouraging or facilitating someone in breaking the law?
Senator, I will do my absolute best, as it is my professional duty to be a neutral arbiter of the law, as I've done as a military judge. In regards to that blog post, again, all of our clients charged with criminal immigration offenses have corollary administrative immigration matters. So they're relevant to each other because it's the same client. As I recall at that time, we were getting a lot of inquiries again about immigration matters. It certainly, and I believe there's another name that was immigration lawyer who was cited in that blog post as well. Our intention was merely to explain some of the differences between a criminal matter and an administrative immigration proceeding, and to state some of the rights people may have, which again is what lawyers often do, whether you work at a law firm, the federal public defender, or elsewhere, just stating legal rights.
Yeah. Thank you.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both for your service, your distinguished careers, both of you as prosecutors and Mr. Federico as a public defender. I've followed the hearing and some of your answers, and I wonder, I just want to be absolutely clear. As a member of the Judge Advocate General Corps, you don't choose your own cases, do you?
No, Senator.
They are assigned to you?
Yes, Senator.
How does that happen?
Senator, as a prosecutor, if you're charged with investigating a matter, you do so, and then until recently, in a law change, almost all of the time, the decision whether to refer charges to court-martial was done by the convening authority. Of course, in the National Defense Authorization Act that's being implemented now, there were some changes to that, and now uniform judge advocates will make those charging decisions. But as a line prosecutor, the cases were brought to you by commanders referring them for investigation. And the same as a defense counsel. Once someone was charged and entitled by statute to counsel, it was sent over for a request. As an officer in charge, I made some of those assignment decisions, and we detailed military counsel to represent service members.
And as a public defender, you don't choose your own cases, do you?
No, sir, I do not.
How does that happen?
Once someone is brought in for initial appearance, usually upon arrest, for example, if they've been indicted, they are going to be brought in before a U.S. magistrate judge, such as Judge Kohler, and the court will appoint counsel to represent them. Our office is there to represent most persons. Of course, we have conflicts, and we have a Criminal Justice Act panel of really fine jurists as well. It's our job then, once we're court appointed, to zealously represent our clients.
You're not rewarded for, as people commonly say, getting people off. You're not increased in salary if you get an acquittal. You're there to represent that person, present the best possible defense, because that's your duty as an advocate, just as the prosecutor has a duty on behalf of the United States government to be as zealous as possible. But you're there really to make the legal system work, correct?
Correct, Senator. I could not agree more.
And so the suggestion by Senator Lee that somehow, as a judge, you will skew the process because of your background, your adherence is to the rule of law, correct?
Absolutely, yes, Senator.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
If there are no further questions, I thank the gentlemen who've appeared in this panel. There may be questions for the record sent your way, and I hope you can respond to them promptly. And at this point, you're dismissed.
Yes, sir.
We'll call up the next panel, the three nominees. Judge Bryan,